Scary video games are damn good at bringing people together, and while most traditional horror titles don't exactly offer much in the way of multiplayer functionality, these terrifying video games all but demand you bring along a best bud to ride shotgun. The Fatal Frame series has always had a cult following among video game horror fans, but its first sequel remains one of the most celebrated and fondly remembered, and that's in spite of literally forcing players to face their fears directly with the only weapon they're armed with, an antique mystical camera. Crimson Butterfly follows a set of twin sisters as they explore the haunted Minakami village, a pleasant place where, a whole buttload of its denizens disappeared under mysterious ritualistic circumstances. The twins are trapped and forced to free the souls of the dead from the clutches of mysterious forces, all while trying to unravel the mysterious village's past and find a way out. Taking pictures of ghosts to weaken them may sound like an absurd gameplay mechanic, but it's actually pretty challenging, surprisingly intuitive, and dare we say, addicting as hell. Even years later, Fatal Frame 2 remains a highly sought-after little gem, one that will have real-life photographers nervous with every shot they snap, wondering what might be lurking just out of frame. There may have been numerous Alien games, but it wasn't until developer Creative Assembly went back to the mold of the original 1979 movie that we got an Alien game that made players afraid of the dark once more. Alien Isolation puts players in the role of Ellen Ripley's daughter, Amanda, as she tried to uncover the fate of her mother's derelict ship. Unfortunately for her and everyone on board the space station where Isolation takes place, a xenomorph is on the loose. Isolation calls back to the nightmarish design and atmosphere of Ridley Scott's film, with stark corridors filled with barely their ambient light. Most of Isolation pits Amanda against a lone xenomorph as it hunts her down through each and every section of the station. The AI keeps tensions high, not only making every new hallway terrifying, but exhausting players mentally by forcing them to constantly be on the defensive. Couple that with a haunting score culled from the original film, and you've got a game that's barely safe to play in broad daylight with all the house lights on. Like the other entries on this list, Hidetaka Suihiro's Deadly Premonition is one that's best experienced playing with others. Unlike those other titles, that's not a testament to its sheer freak-out factor. Deadly Premonition demands an audience to laugh, scream, and scratch their heads in unison, all in equal measure. It's pretty hard to explain, but imagine, if you will, Twin Peaks meets The Room meets Silent Hill meets your favorite slasher flick. That's more or less where Deadly Premonition starts, and it only gets weirder from there.
1 turkey, strawberry jam, and cereal sandwich.
Sounds like the sinner's sandwich. Self-inflicted punishment to atone for past sins.
As FBI agent Francis York Morgan, players arrive in Greenvale to solve the murder of a teenage girl, a murder that bears a striking similarity to several others across the country. But it's the Greenvale case that takes things up a notch with a whole slew of supernatural elements, not to mention a mysterious fella called the Raincoat Killer. And that's without even mentioning the government conspiracies, the split personalities, and that creepy Forrest Kaysen guy. Yeesh.
It's so relaxing in these parts, too. Oh, I just love all the nature. I feel so relaxed here.
Deadly Premonition doesn't have the greatest visuals, and the characters are so bizarre. It's almost hard to believe this game made it out of development at all. But its lack of polish, coupled with an abundance of absurdity, and a wacky soundtrack guaranteed to keep you humming for days, is what makes Deadly Premonition such a fantastically good bad game, and one you definitely want to play with some friends around to witness, if only because they probably wouldn't believe you otherwise. SOMA is a game so terrifying and challenging that developer Frictional Games released an update to it that removed all monster encounters to make the experience more palatable for players. That alone should give you some indication of just how frightening it is trying to survive in the undersea research station Pathos 2. Without spoiling too much, here's the gist. After a worldwide cataclysm, the only people left alive on Earth are the inhabitants of the Pathos 2. Players take on the role of one Simon Jarrett as he explores the dilapidated station. SOMA plays with the ideas of solitude and the concept of how a personal apocalypse contrasts and complements a global one. It also doesn't refrain from touching on some more metaphysical ideas of consciousness and the sense of self. Those who just can't handle the mindless hostiles populating the game should find no shame in switching over to safe mode. The atmosphere is still haunting enough that you may want a co-pilot nearby. Plus, you'll automatically have someone to talk about SOMA's narrative with when it's all over. That is some deep. After creating the Resident Evil series and ushering that franchise into legendary game status, designer Shinji Mikami turned his attentions to a new, even more horrifying game. Mikami believed the survival horror tropes had evolved to the point where players weren't so easily scared anymore. So with The Evil Within, he and his development team made sure to instill panic and tension in players by relying on some classic tricks. Almost all of The Evil Within's battles take place in tight, confined spaces, making escape from whatever disgusting creature is chasing you nearly impossible. Ammunition and weapons are in short supply, meaning every shot and strike must count. Otherwise, some weird guy with a safe for a head might chop you in half. Yeah, those are some truly effed up character designs. The Evil Within is chock full of nasty-looking folks looking to put you down for good. Some may have barbed wire heads, some might look as if they were caught in an explosion in a glass factory. They're all creepy and violent, but what makes the world scarier is the idea that something more monstrous is the driving force. These creatures are out to get you, but like you, they're just victims of a greater evil. Wait for it. Within. The Xbox 360 had such an incredible library. It's easy to forget about the games that helped launch the console back in 2005. Condemned Criminal Origins is one of the few original Xbox 360 games that has withstood the test of time, and it's still one of the more terror-filled titles to hit Microsoft's second console. In the role of Ethan Thomas, players in Condemned are initially tasked with trying to solve the murders being committed by a serial killer known as the Matchmaker, a nut job with a penchant for elaborately staging crime scenes with mannequins. From there, things only escalate, and fast, as new terrors rear their butt-ugly heads and the bizarre conspiracy starts to unravel. Condemned is a thrilling experience for players who use CSI tools like a black light to track blood trails, battle vagrants with brutal melee combat, and creep through barely lit, ominous settings. Even today, Condemned: A Criminal Origins still holds up fairly well, especially when playing with a squeamish and jumpy partner who doesn't respond well to stuff like, well, this.
Help me!
Few developers have a penchant for mixing cinematic storytelling and action in the way Remedy does, which is what makes Alan Wake such a unique thriller. Though Alan Wake isn't an outright fright fest, it's a well-crafted mystery in a town that recalls echoes of Stephen King's The Dark Half, where an author must confront elements of his latest suspense novel that have come to life.
I'd forgotten there were still places like this. Towns where everybody knew everybody.
Welcome to the Oh Dear Diner.
The episodic structure of Alan Wake keeps pacing on point, constantly moving players towards the ultimate goal of finding out what the heck is happening, while also deepening the mystery with every chapter. As he struggles to get to the bottom of a series of bizarre occurrences, Alan must also fend off the darkness and actual shadow creatures that aren't just out to kill him, but everyone that lives in his town too. Alan Wake won't have you gripping your significant other's hand in fright, but it will keep you from ever taking up writing that great American novel you've been planning. Remember, the pen isn't really mightier than the sword. That's just a dumb saying. Unless you've been living under a rock, chances are you've heard of everybody's favorite supernatural kidnapper, Slender Man. Born on the internet, this nightmare has been haunting our screens for years in one form or another. From movies to games and creepypastas, Slender Man is a definitive urban legend of the digital age. But of all of Slendy's incarnations, the one we're tasked with avoiding in Blue Isle Studios' 2013 survival horror game Slender the Arrival may be the best known and most feared. In Slender the Arrival, you play as Lauren, childhood friend of Kate from the game Slender the 8 Pages. Arrival throws numerous tasks and mechanics at you throughout the different areas of the game, keeping you on your toes and changing the rules as soon as you get comfortable. Arrival shines most when it tosses you into a new setting and forces you to make a split-second decision, and it's the ensuing panic that is best enjoyed in large groups and under many bowls worth of raining popcorn. Practically coming out of nowhere, Layers of Fear was an unexpectedly chilling horror delight from Polish developer Bloober Team that followed a disturbed artist as he struggled to complete his masterpiece. Layer of Fear's vile forces weren't concerned with trying to kill you. Instead, the narrative-heavy game is memorable for being an eerie, personal experience chock full of mystery, and bursting at the brim with tried and true jump scares. The painter protagonist went more than a little bit loopy, and his artworks were horrific and violent affairs that would give even the steeliest critic goosebumps. As for that masterpiece, we won't spoil all the fun of what happens during the course of the game, but you definitely won't expect any of Layer's twists and turns. Let's just say a picture is truly worth 1,000 words, and all of those words, in this case, are stuttery, terrified expletives. We know you saw this one coming a mile away, but when considering the scariest video games ever conceived, Silent Hill 2 demands to be part of the conversation. The franchise's earliest days are still looked upon with the fondest of memories, with the first sequel in particular standing above its brethren thanks to its gut-wrenching story, hellish landscape, and nightmarish psychosexual imagery. Not to mention it was the entry that first introduced players to the brutal villain, Pyramid Head. You've heard this song before, but let's give it another whirl, eh? So, lead character James returns to the town of Silent Hill after getting a letter from his dead wife Mary. But instead of finding her, James meets, among other cheerful folk, a mischievous little girl, a depressed young lady obsessed with a knife, and this charming jackass.
It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead!
Oh, and a mysterious woman named Maria, who just happens to look freaking-zactly like Mary.
Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful.
While survival horror games have traditionally been rooted in escaping from literal monsters, Silent Hill 2's excellence comes from the layered approach of terrorizing its characters psychologically, by delving into their subconscious fears, desires, and regrets. It's messed up, and the horrors abound at every turn. So playing Silent Hill 2 alone is a true challenge for the bravest of souls. Seriously, there are fewer characters that instill fright in aging gamers than Pyramid Head. Still, even facing the series' hallmark grotesque nurses doesn't quite hold a candle to facing James's own demons. And those memories are what linger long after the last emergency siren has blown. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more SVG videos about your favorite games are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.